Let's get the Australian perspective at Rugby World Cup 2023. I thought they were one of the more impressive sides, especially in the opening halves of any game. The pace which Australia played with was right up there. And of course, most importantly, they got a win. That has been much discussed, I'm sure, by Tom Deason and others across the Australian rugby fraternity. Joins us out of the Sydney Morning Herald. Thanks so much, Tom. Are you frying like we Kiwis are, or are you Australians actually dealing with the heat far better?
Maybe we're dealing with a little bit better. It is very warm in St. Etienne, staying out of the sun as much as possible, but a nice reprieve from the cooler Sydney spring at the moment.
And how have the Wallabies been received in France?
Great, awesome. Paris was a little bit of sort of a crazy few days. They were obviously based in St. Etienne and then went up on the Thursday before the game or Wednesday. But back here, they went to a school today and were absolutely mobbed like rock stars. They I loved there very much. So I believe the school that they were at today sung the anthem. The school kids singing the anthems at these World Cups, as you would hear through the PA, and this was the school that sung their national anthem. So they got a personal rendition today. So that was pretty cool for them.
Oh, that is awesome, isn't it? It's that is very, very cool. Just tell me about the general mood of Australian rugby and the Wallabies, maybe more importantly, prior to the tournament. You know, that the losses were mounting up. They couldn't ignore that. You couldn't ignore asking them about it. So, what was the overall feeling about what was possibly achievable?
I think one word would sum it up, and that's just hope. Hope that Eddie Jones' record is arguably the greatest World Cup coach. Obviously, has won a World Cup, but his record, could argue, speaks for itself there. Five straight losses isn't great. I don't think the Australian public loved hearing Eddie say that, we basically were working towards the World Cup. People who paid the hard-earned money want to see wins straight away. They came very close a couple of times. There was the Argentina test in Sydney and obviously in Dunedin, very close as well. But I think there was hope and faith that the plan would come to fruition at the World Cup. They've beaten Georgia, which is a start. It's certainly not beating Fiji or Wales. They basically beat Fiji this weekend, and it almost assures them a quarterfinal spot. So that would be nice to bank away. But not winning in 288 days, Dave Rennie being sacked as coach when people could probably, albeit the wins weren't there, see some improvement on that tour up north last year. There was, Eddie still needs to tick a few things off to really get the Australian public on board. But if they can do that in the next two against Fiji and Wales, I think they will get there. And then they've got a dream draw, which I at least appreciate that they acknowledge, rather than saying, "Oh, every game's difficult and important." The Wallabies know that this is an absolute rails run to a semi-final if they want it.
Mm. So much change. I was looking at a Wallabies lineup from just 2 years ago against the All Blacks to try and give me some sort of context. It's quite extraordinary when you look at the turnover of players. You factor in changes of coaches. So was there a sense of upheaval? Is that how you viewed it?
Yeah, totally. There's been careers that have been ended through Eddie Jones. He's made massive calls to get rid of Quay Cooper and Michael Hooper and these guys. He just didn't think that, not necessarily those guys, he just needed to clean it out. Now, some Australian fans would argue, well, yeah, you can pick a young team at this World Cup and it might bear fruit in 2027, but we want to do as well at this World Cup. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of faith in Eddie there. I think 17 of the 23 guys in that team for the Georgia game hadn't played at a World Cup. There's guys who've played a handful of tests. I think the All Blacks tight five had more tests than Australia's 23 altogether. So that gives you some kind of context around just how inexperienced this Wallabies team is. But having been on the ground and followed them pretty closely this year, there is confidence within them. They're all young. They haven't lost too many tests, over back-to-back-to-back years. So I think there's a little bit of exuberance and backing themselves that will come to the fore in this World Cup. And that's what Eddie wants. And he's sort of playing to that advantage and trying to get that humming through the group.
Well, you look at some of those individuals. Donaldson, I thought was really good at fullback. Not good enough for the Waratahs, but good enough to play well at a World Cup. Go figure.
Exactly. That's a tricky one at the Waratahs. They just couldn't, they had to squeeze him out through cap space there. Eddie Jones is a really, really big fan of Ben Donaldson. He's one of the nicest kids you'll ever meet, but
Yeah.
he would admit that his Super Rugby season wasn't amazing. He got picked in the initial squad a few months back before the TRC and acknowledged that maybe he'd been a bit lucky. And everyone thought Quay Cooper was going to be here as the first or second choice number 10. And Ben Donaldson was listed as a utility, which was a bit of a weird thing on the press release. And as it turns out, Eddie's gone with him at 15. And it was more or less a case of if Carter Gordon had kicked his goals against France 2 weeks ago, Ben Donaldson may not play that game. Andrew Kellaway probably keeps his spot there, but the kid comes in, bangs 25 points away, a couple of nice tries. He's put pressure on Eddie Jones to pick him again this week for Fiji. Whether he'll do that or not, I'm not sure. But a very good start, a pleasing start, and a pretty impressive backline at the moment. But it's only Georgia, no one's getting carried away, I don't think.
Well, kicking off the tee and out of the hand's been a real feature of these opening games. Absolutely. So Eddie might be onto something there. But your overall impressions of that performance against Georgia, as I said at the top, I thought the first 20 minutes, 25, the speed for which Australia were able to play at was quite something.
Yeah, definitely. They want to get their outside backs balls. Jordan Petaia, who's had so much potentially burst onto the scene at the 19 World Cup. I don't mind him there in that 13 channel. Obviously, scored a try, set up a try, so that was fantastic. Gave them a bit of a points buffer. And for so long, I think Australian rugby fans just want to see wins. The idea and side of seeing the Wallabies tick the scoreboard over with 3 first-half penalties doesn't happen as much. They always love to go for the corner and try and play, the Australian way. Well, what is that? If that's winning, then I think fans want to see that. So that was pleasing that they did that. Scrum was really good. Second half got a little bit ugly, and I had guys coming off the bench who I don't think necessarily were the right fit for that position. They got away with it a little bit there. I think Georgia could have definitely mounted a bit of a comeback and didn't. So certainly not a perfect performance, but you can't underestimate how important just winning and by 20 points does for that group who've been told, this plan's going to work. Eventually will come good. So a few well-earned beers, but very early days in this tournament.
Were you nervy of a Georgian comeback? It seemed like they really got their tails up, and I'm thinking of the break from the fullback. It then throws it to Tupou, and that they score almost a 14-point try, if you will. If that goes to the other end, you've got a heck of a game on your hand, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely a huge moment in that game. Taniela Tupou was desperately trying to get back in the defensive line because it was so hot, and he'd played all but we had played the whole match. I think he was a bit cooked. So just fortuitous timing to end up there. Gives a great ball to Ben Donaldson, and that's credit to Taniela Tupou as well. He's a pretty classy player outside of just the general forward requirements. Scrum, set piece, all that stuff. He can throw a ball, and he's got pretty good steps. So I think you make your own luck in those situations. But yeah, Georgia just didn't fire. I mean, they definitely could have mounted a comeback there and didn't. And I think the Wallabies will know that they got out of jail a little bit there, and their bench needs a bit of work. The line out, there was 3 in a row at the end there that they missed. So again, that's been a bit of an ongoing problem, but I think they can rectify that against a very different Fijian side that they'll face this week to what Georgia were.
Yeah. How are you feeling about that game now after the wildly entertaining game between Wales and Fiji? I'm still struggling to comprehend what happened there. On another night, Fiji could have put 50, 60 points on Wales, such as how dangerous they looked. But, they lost a lot of possession, dropped the ball over the line a couple of times, probably on the wrong side of some interesting refereeing, I thought personally. How are you feeling about the challenges Fiji will pose?
Yeah, they'll definitely be a very different team, throw the ball around. A number of guys that Australia know pretty well through having played them in the draw, set up in Super Rugby. I think Eddie Jones may make some changes to that Wallabies team. I think you'll definitely see the scrum as a way that they can dominate Fiji. I don't think that was particularly crash hot last night.
Yeah.
And we know that for Fiji to have sustained success, they could throw the ball around and play there. Brilliant to watch style, but if their set piece isn't firing, other teams will put them to the sword. And Australia's scrum is going well at the moment. That'll be an area they try and exploit. I don't know how I feel. You never know with this Wallaby side. They could capitulate badly. They could win by 30. There are guys in that back line who are, half the Wallabies back line's Fijians, so they've also got that flair about them. And it's a big game for them as well. They want to do their country proud, and it'll be a great game. I haven't looked at the weather yet. It looks reasonably hot. Not that will matter too much for both teams who like playing in the heat and the draw over in Suva normally. So a big game, but huge opportunity for the Wallabies to basically bank a quarterfinal. That just settles the camp a bit, I think. Heading into the last 2-3 weeks, they can really nut out what they need to and attack a quarterfinal.
What do you think a win for Australia does for the mindset of the squad? I think it may have even been you asked Eddie that during the press conference, and did he give the old I don't know what you're talking about there? Surely, like he knew what you were talking about. Like 5 losses in a row, a win's got to be huge, right?
I think Eddie sometimes doesn't want to answer the question that he doesn't want to answer. So I thought it was a fair question, but
Oh, more than fair. Yeah.
maybe it spoke a little bit deeper in the fact that maybe he thought I was indicating that they weren't confident and that they'd been flat on confidence and that win would do something for them. But
Yes.
I genuinely think that behind the scenes they are pretty young and confident and not affected by previous results. And maybe that was what he was getting at. But there's definitely, you could sense it in the players that they knew how important that Georgia game was. Like the fact that people back home were even talking about Georgia possibly beating Australia. Like when has that ever happened in history? So it shouldn't have got to that point.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a reflection of where the Wallabies were at, getting closer and closer. So again, it's a building thing. They keep banging on about just wanting to improve week by week. They look at that draw. They've got a 2-week break heading into a quarterfinal. They're not going to get a better crack at this World Cup. Not saying they're going to win it, but there'll be other teams looking at what the Wallabies have got in front of them and thinking, okay, you guys are blessed with that. Make the most of it.
It's interesting listening to the All Blacks forwards coach Jason Ryan this week talk about the injury list that they have, and he spoke about that, and he felt the All Blacks need a full deck if they're going to win this thing. Sort of in some way questioning his own squad's depth is one way you could interpret it. It's pretty similar with this Australia, isn't it? That they need slices of luck with good health. They can't go 24, 25, 26 deep, can they? That's probably a fair assessment on my behalf.
Very fair call. Very fair call. A few players spring to mind. They're missing Alan Alatoa,
Yeah,
a very good
huge.
tight head prop. If Tanela Tupe goes down, which he was sort of a bit dicey in the lead up to this World Cup, that's a huge, huge blow. Angus Bell on the other side as well is playing well. James Slipper's back on the bench. So they're sort of a few really key guys. I think Samu Karevi's nowhere near his best at the moment, but he doesn't have to be, and that's okay. But when he is, and if he's firing with Carter Gordon, Samu Karevi, absolutely invaluable there. And then Marika Korombete, again, like they're actually pretty blessed with outside backs, but it is sort of those bench players, as you say, really settled on their bench or their reserve props are all pretty young and very young and inexperienced. You know, half those guys don't have 10 caps, which that's just a byproduct of Eddie ripping the floor up and a few injuries, but a very, very fair call that the Wallabies, I mean, even in the halfback position this week will be interesting. Tate McDermott is out of this Fiji game. So Eddie's tried to build this team around Tate around the last sort of 3-4 tests. So he's out of the picture. Nick White probably going to start, but again, one of those two halfbacks in camp go down, that'll be a problem for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more before I let you go. Your own observations of the first few games of the tournament. A good spectacle. The crowds are fabulous, aren't they? They add so much energy to this. But the on-field product, how have you rated it?
Great, awesome. Yeah, we've been very busy. Went to France, New Zealand, which was a great spectacle. I've been to a few games there, but that took the cake as a spectacle. I think as much as we love our Kiwi friends, I think that's good for the tournament. I've actually tipped New Zealand to win the whole thing. I think they'll reverse that result in the final. So I've got no doubt that New Zealand will go away and build and come into a massive quarterfinal, far better for that experience. But yeah, elsewhere, there's just fans everywhere. There's been so much build up to this World Cup. You see firsthand how much France love their rugby. It's been brilliant. Getting to a few games, and even in Saint Etienne, which is not a massive place down here, there's supporters from all countries. Like there was a few Scots going mental yesterday. I don't know why there's Scots in Saint Etienne, but they seem to be popping up everywhere. The pubs are overflowing and everyone's having a good time. It's just the best. It could be one of a World Cup for the ages. I really, really think that.
Right. So you've got New Zealand winning the whole thing against whom in the final? Sorry, Mark.
France. Yeah,
so
France. Yep. I think they'll just reverse that, come back and into it. I mean, it's hard for New Zealand at the moment trying to come back from that. I feel like whatever they do in the next 3 matches isn't going to mean a lot. It's not going to change people's perception in New Zealand around them because they're expected to win those games. But look at England. Like England were a basket case coming in. Everyone was talking about them maybe missing out on a quarterfinal, and they pump Argentina, and look how quickly that narrative can change. So I think good coaches and good teams appreciate that World Cups aren't won in the first game, and that once you hit that quarterfinal week, that's really the only game that matters at that point in time.
Tom, lovely to hear your voice. Lovely to see you in this instance. Thanks so much. Always appreciate your time and really enjoy your insights to the game, and go well. And hopefully, we can catch up with you real soon.
Yeah, too easy. Cheers.
SENZ. It's Kiwi for sport.